So Mary Magdalene was on her way to the tomb that first Easter. When she was there, she thought she was in the midst of an ending. In many communities today, we gather around the cross. Some might gather around grave plots, placing flowers on them. Easter is only a memory. The women who'd gone to the tomb to care for the body of the dead Jesus, they thought it was an ending. Life is full of endings and beginnings. Life is a session of losses. For Jesus, it was the same. Eating at a table with those who would betray and abandon him, which seemed like an ending. Facing death, a redemptive death, but an unjust death, an ending. Feeling the strength and life and breath leave his body at the place of the skull, an ending. In our lives, there are many Good Fridays. You can probably make a list of Good Fridays in what you've had in your own life, when you felt forsaken, an ending. Days when strength and life and breath seem to be leaving your body, an ending. Days when you were betrayed and you wrestled with forgiveness, an ending. And yet Easter reminds us what looks like an ending is usually a beginning. Early in that morning, Mary came to the tomb. The body is missing. She thinks it has been stolen. So she runs and tells Peter and John, and they race back. John goes into the tomb. It is empty. He sees and believes. It is a new beginning. But Mary is standing outside the tomb. For her, this is an ending. That something happened, didn't it? Two of us can be close together and near the same situation, but see a different ending. Then she hears a voice, a message. Woman, why are you weeping? They've stolen the body, she says. He's missing. And now we come to the heart of the story. We know something that Mary doesn't. Have you ever listened to someone, maybe your children or maybe a friend, when they described a situation and it seemed like an ending, but you know it's not an ending but a beginning? We know the story here. She thinks she's talking to the gardener. Isn't it amazing how God comes to us in ordinary people? God's grace never comes to us in the abstract, but comes to us in ordinary people. She tries to explain that the body has been stolen. He looks at her and says, Mary. And it is Jesus. And she says, Teacher. And she goes and announces to the others, I've seen the Lord. What looks like an ending to Mary is actually a beginning. This is our Easter faith. Easter faith makes us aware of the one who is with us, even when we mistakenly assume that we are alone. Easter faith is built upon the foundation of the one who rolled away the stone, even when we are at the end of our strengths and our efforts. Easter faith is the root and the one who continually teaches us. If we have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, the ending can be a beginning. Easter faith gives birth to resurrection, living, doubt as a way to belief, mourning as a way to dancing, and despair as a way to hope, and death as a way to life. Easter faith is about glory and victory, but it's also about fear and uncertainty. Have you ever had the experience when watching a good movie and think that the ending has been all tied up nice and neatly, but maybe not the way that you like it, but it's still all done? And then there's that surprise. On Good Friday, even Jesus said, it is finished. Maybe those who were listening were thinking, it's all over. Let's just go home. It looked like an ending. Maybe you're here today because you come here on most Sundays. Or maybe you're here because it's Easter. Maybe you're here because you've come to an ending. Endings are about obstacles in our lives. Sometimes holding on to the past is an obstacle. Sometimes not seeing the joy in the ordinary is an obstacle. Sometimes being afraid is an obstacle. Sometimes doing it all ourselves, in our own strength, in our own time, is an obstacle. Sometimes avoiding the tomb is an obstacle. In life, there are endings. We reach obstacles and it seems to be over. But what looks like an ending, when seen through the eyes and the lens of Easter faith, is always a beginning. Easter's about overcoming obstacles. Overcoming obstacles is the great theme of the Bible. We have Abraham and Sarah who are too old. It looks like an ending. And God speaks to them and says, I'm going to give you a child. And from this and your family should be blessed. What looks like an ending is actually a beginning. Moses had obeyed God and led the people out of slavery under the Pharaoh. And he finds himself on the edge of the water in the sea, and it looks like an ending. And God speaks and said, stretch out your arms and divide the sea, and you will pass through the water on dry ground. And they crossed the Red Sea to safety. What looked like an ending is actually a beginning. Israel was suffering in exile. They'd been driven away from their land and their temple destroyed. It looked like an ending. And God spoke and said through the prophets, comfort, oh comfort my people, said God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and cry to her that she has served her term and that her penalty is paid. What looked like an ending is actually a beginning. In the early morning, the darkness is just giving way to daybreak, and Mary is weeping. Once again, it looks like an ending, and someone speaks to her. Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for? Then someone speaks and says, Mary. God said her name. God always says our names. And he tells the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And what looks like an ending is actually a beginning. In the early morning, the dark is just giving way to daybreak. The disciples of Jesus knows this hour. Maybe you are here because you are at an ending. Maybe there's an obstacle in your life that you're afraid to confront and it seems insurmountable. Maybe you are weeping. But Easter is about a time of ending and beginning. Easter is about obstacles and the power of God to overcome them. Ending or beginning. In the world you face persecution, but take courage. I have conquered the world. Ending or beginning. I am the resurrection, the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And anyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Ending or beginning. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. I am with you always to the end of the time. There's a parable about 3 trees that stood in the forest and prayed about their ultimate destination. Ending or beginning. One tree wanted to be used as a magnificent building. Instead, it was cut down and used for a trough in a stable in Bethlehem. The second tree wanted to be used in the construction of a great merchant ship. Instead, the tree was cut down and used as a small fishing boat to sail in the Sea of Galilee. The third tree wanted to point people to God. That tree wanted to stay in the forest. Instead, it was cut down and made into a cross. Our hopes in the future that is unrevealed until this season. Sometimes God alone can see. Sometimes God can alone see where we are, and sometimes, especially at Easter, what looks like an ending actually is a new beginning. Shalom and amen.